and thank you for joining us. My name is Lawrence Lang, and today I'm in Essex, and I've been invited into the home of Lorraine Daniels. Lorraine was the principal mezzo-soprano with the D'Oyly Carte Opera Company until 1982, when, unfortunately, the company closed. Lorraine, good morning, and thank you for the hospitality. I suppose a good place to start is how you came to join the D'Oyly Carte and why. Did you like Gilbert and Sullivan before you joined?
Oh, good morning, Lawrence. Well, from the age of 16, I was a junior exhibitioner at Trinity College of Music in London. I used to go up to London once during the week and on a Saturday. I was still at school and they allowed me to attend. My singing teacher was Frederick Cox, OBE. He was once the principal of Manchester School of Music. He retired, but still continued teaching, and that's when I was able to have lessons with him at Trinity during the week. The Saturday sessions consisted of composing, musicianship, sight singing, choir, acting and piano lessons. When I was 18, I became a full-time student, singing being my first instrument and piano second. The classes included the same as a junior exhibitioner, but more intense, plus we had languages to learn, mainly Italian and German. The history of music lectures just mentioned Gilbert and Sullivan, but no detail was given. It was sort of just passed away. I passed my ATCL and LTCL diplomas and also won the Elizabeth Schumann German Lied competition. It was in the beginning of my fourth full-time year in 1975, around October time, I think, that Mr. Cox told me that D'Oyly Carte Opera Company was auditioning for a mezzo-soprano the next day. I have to admit that I had not heard of the company. I had played a few Gilbert and Sullivan pieces on the piano when I was about 9, hence I was very new to all this. I went along to the Savoy Theatre and was greeted by Stuart Nash, a friend of Frederick Cox. I wore a long black flowery dress, which I wore when I won the German Lied Prize. I actually sang Voi che sapete in English. It is from The Marriage of Figaro by Mozart. I had performed it quite a few times, so that helped. When I finished, I was asked to go down into the auditorium. I was met by quite a few people. I'm afraid I do not know who they were, but I was told they wanted me to join straight away. They had auditioned hundreds of people, but my presentation was the best, apparently. Next, they told me that the company were going to America and Canada in April 1976. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and that I would be touring 48 weeks a year. It all seemed like a wonderful dream. I was asked to join the company in Liverpool before Christmas. I told them I was booked to go to Vienna at Christmas. To my surprise, they let me go, and then I joined the opera company on the 7th of January 1976. Well, on the 7th of January 1976, I waited at the stage door of the Sadler's Wells Theatre to meet Michael Hayland. Michael showed me around the theatre and introduced me to various people. Well, I always remember the door open to the men's chorus. I remember the first person I saw was Billy Strachan. Everyone in the company was very friendly. Well, the music department gave me 6 scores of different operas. Luckily, I could read and play music. Now, I was the only mezzo-soprano chorister in a famous opera company. Harmony lines had to be learned, which was a challenge as I trained as a soprano at Trinity College of Music. I was told that I had an extensive range, singing low and high notes. Well, it was Jimmy Marsden taught me all the moves. He couldn't believe how quickly I remembered and learnt everything. My first performance was Patience at Sadler's Wells in London. My mum and dad attended. Dad was really nervous for me. He kept twiddling his ring on his finger. When they got home, the ring wasn't on his finger. I went back to the theatre early the next day, looked around the stalls where they were sitting. No ring could be found. I asked if the ring had been handed in. Unfortunately, it was lost forever.
Well, thank you very much for that. That was very interesting, and especially your references to the college having very sort of little knowledge or recognition of Gilbert and Sullivan, which is something that is so often seen these days, and especially with radio stations not really giving us much in the way of GNS. One of the topics that people seem to enjoy hearing about is when things go wrong. Without embarrassing any particular former colleague, are there any disasters that you can share with us?
Oh, there's lots and lots and lots. It's ones that I've got to try and remember. My first experience was when I was new to perform in Iolanthe. At first, I was a chorus member. It came to the Act 1 finale where the fairies march around. And this is when I really just did my sort of first Iolanthe, so it all was new to me. For a few performances, everything was going fine. In this part, I only had to follow the chorus ladies, who were in front of me. Then flu hit the company bad. One by one, certain members went down with the flu, and then it happened. I had no one to follow. I was in the front, and I had to take the lead. Yes, a bit scary, but I did it. I was given the part of Layla, or Lila, however they would like to say it.
Was this the new production that Michael had just reimagined?
Yes.
Yeah, right, yes.
And the opening was a lot of dancing, tripping hither, tripping thither. A lovely friend of mine was playing another small part. And there we were, dancing around, and her right shoe came off and landed in the middle of the circle. We continued to dance, smiling away, when her left shoe came off, landed by its side. What are the chances that the shoes landed in a ballet first position? They looked perfect, and we still continued to dance around them. We were all fine. Then we saw the fairies' feet. In the 1977 Jubilee production of Iolanthe, we had to wear 2 pairs of socks. One black pair, then a pair of silver socks over the top. Unfortunately, as we looked down, 2 white big toes had appeared through both pairs of socks. This time it was hard to control the giggles, but we were able to position ourselves so she could put her shoes back on. The Silver Jubilee production caused a lot of problems. The costumes were sprayed with some kind of paint. It was like a metal paint. One of the girls would come out in a rash. She was obviously allergic to it, but never knew about allergies then, as much as we know now.
A bit like in The Wizard of Oz with the Tin Man. Because,
yes.
It was Buddy Ebsen who was Jed Clampett in Beverly Hillbillies. He was originally down to play that part, but because of the sprayed aluminium, he had an allergy and was hospitalised. So,
was he? Actually, the crowns in Iolanthe were very stiff, not particularly comfortable. 2 ladies of the chorus were dancing when both of their crowns got locked together whilst on stage. Try as they may, it was some time until they could unlock themselves. The rest of us could only watch and continue with the opera, whilst we could see the 2 of them looking like 2 stags having a fight. As I played Iolanthe later on, my opening entrance was always a challenge. Again, it was the Silver Jubilee production. The set consisted of a back walkway. I had to enter from the wings, walk along the back, and halfway along turn right across a very narrow bridge, which had pieces of wood for the sides. When I entered with a huge bright blue and silver cloak and hood, I would walk along that back way, turn right to get over the narrow bridge. Of course, being so narrow, I have these hazards. There were times I would walk on the bridge and the cloak got caught. It didn't help that the cloak had slits in it, so it was pure luck if I made it across that bridge. I was always greeted by a few of the fairies, and if I got stuck, I would discreetly say, "I'm stuck." I would take my cloak off, and then I would continue across the bridge, turn left, then turn right down a steep ramp through a hole in the gauze. The timing had to be precise to sing my opening line to the Fairy Queen. There was a time when I played Phoebe after I sang "When a Wooer Goes A-Wooing." I'm left on stage crying, and then I have to speak my dialogue. My father, played by John Eldon, entered. My dialogue to him was, "Has no reprieve arrived?" At which point John answers. But then it went into a complete chaotic answer, and it went on and on and on. I don't think he took a breath, and there was no chance for ages for me to say my next line. When these moments happen, the mind goes into 90 to the dozen. His words were making sense, but it seemed to never end, and then the moment came. I quickly said the next line. How funny it was that my next line was going to be, "Amen to that." Both John and I continued as though it was all part of the opera. John was a great character. There was a time when we were in Leeds. I think it was the Grand Theatre. Yes, it was. And I was understudying Phoebe then. We had already performed a matinee, and after the matinee, the company would usually go to a restaurant to eat. Barry Clark and I went to the famous Harry Ramsden fish restaurant. The company rules was always be back in the theatre by the half. That meant half hour before curtain up. We had a lovely meal, left the restaurant, but Barry left something behind. We went back for it and then back to the Grand Theatre. There were many stairs to climb to get to the chorus dressing rooms, and as I climbed, and remembering it was only half an hour to curtain up, I was greeted by Jimmy Marsland at the top of the stairs. And he says, "You're on." My first time to play Phoebe. I opened the opera all alone to sing "When Maiden Loves" with a spinning wheel. I had never practised with a spinning wheel in my understudy rehearsals. Now, Phoebe is a big part, lots of dialogue and songs. My head was going into a whirl. Only a half an hour to put makeup on, wig and costumes. How I managed to be ready in time is thanks to the dressers and Heather Perkins, the wig mistress. Well, the overture began, the spinning wheel in place. I sat at it, wondering how it worked. Well, I got it working, but spinning the wrong way. Then the intro started on my song. I sang the second verse first, so my mind told me, sing the first verse second, and add the extra bits after. It is absolutely amazing how the mind thinks two things at the same time. The rest of the scenes went well. The principals were very supportive. Kenneth Southwood was a great help. When I became a principal, the part of Phoebe became one of my favourite characters to play. The music is wonderful, and the overture, which is lovely, will always remind me of that time when I first performed Phoebe as an understudy. There's another time, I think it was in Bristol. Yes, it was a time when I was in the chorus. We were playing the Hippodrome in Bristol. The dressing rooms were old, and we had a dressing room at the top for the non-smoking group. It was frowned upon that we decided to insist, whenever possible, to have a dressing room to ourselves, just a small group of us. I have to say, I was very opposed to smoking. As the years have gone by, my thoughts of this have changed so many situations in the world. Smoking has been banned in so many areas. At last, people do not have to endure the toxic smoke, especially in small places. Anyway, it was our responsibility to wash our own socks and tights that we wore as part of our costumes. I was aware that this old theatre didn't have a tannoy system. A man would knock on the door and tell you that a certain entrance was required. For us, it was the Yeoman of the Guard, just before the shot scene. Of course, with no tannoy, we couldn't hear the show. We knew the call gave us plenty of time, so we all continued doing what we were doing. Anyway, I was washing the socks in the sink. The window was open and we heard a mighty bang. I looked out of the window to see if it was a car backfiring. Then it dawned on us. It was the shot scene. We all jumped up and had wet hands and we rushed down all the stairs to the side of the stage. We missed our entrance. I've never seen such an empty crowd scene on stage. The only thing we could do was to sing in the wings. Yes, we got told off.
I can imagine, yes.
In Pirates, we had a lovely lady called Suzanne O'Keefe, who has sadly passed away. In fact, we were doing a Zoom with Vivian Teeny and Patty Elliott. Yep. Just literally a week before she passed. Yeah. So I've always got that vision of, and she was still as bubbly as ever. Fantastic. We were friends for years. Anyway, we had to wear crinoline dresses in Pirates with hoops, petticoats and long bloomers. We were all on stage when her knicker elastic broke. Gradually, they fell to the ground. In her elegant way, she stepped out of the bloomers and stepped to one side. We could all see what happened, but then she had to gracefully pick them up and to get rid of them into the wings. Anyway, she threw them, and unfortunately the bloomers filled with air became like a parachute as she tossed them into the air. They never made it to the side of the stage. Instead, they landed on the scenery for all to see. It looked like the washing was being hung up to dry. Oh dear. Anyway, just going back to the Yeoman of the Guard, which I just thought of, I was doing the scene between Phoebe and Shadbolt. I forgot where we were performing, but I reject Shadbolt, which was played by Kenneth Sanford. He storms off, but this particular time he was quite animated and storms off into the wings, and he kept going, only to push open the fire exit door and went straight out into the street, and the door immediately closed on him. Those who know the character of Shadbolt and the costume, it must have shocked the public walking by. All these moments make you smile and have great memories. Things going wrong. There was an incident at Sadler's Wells, and we had a bomber scare, and the audience had to obviously go out into the street, and also, well, all of us had to go out into the street. And I remember Geoffrey Shovelton, and he was in his tunic and his makeup, flamboyant makeup, and we're all gathered at the side of the street and we're talking to the audience, which was
unusual.
And this person in the audience looked at Jeff, looked up and down at Jeff, and then she says, "Are you in this opera?" Somebody would be dressed like that normally. But eventually we got the go-ahead to go back into the theatre. And it was when the three men come over the wall. And the very first thing that they sing is "Gently, gently, evidently, we are safe so far." Well, that got a huge laugh. Right. You can imagine, can't you?
I can imagine, yes.
But it was funny, but it was also a little bit worrying at that time.
Yes, of course, yes. Oh, and Geoffrey Shovelton, he was an amazing performer, wasn't he? Yes,
he would email me every week.
Yes.
And he would come here, and we'd have many a time.
Yeah, lovely man. Lovely man.
I used to go to the side of the stage to watch the operas often. You never got tired of seeing them or
No.
hearing them, and always still keep making you laugh. Anyway, I remember waiting for the opening of the Dragoon Guards patients. A great stirring entrance. There was a fairly new member called Patrick Wilkes entered with the rest of the men's chorus, looking dashing in their bright red uniforms, even wearing spurs on their boots. Now, Patrick was very tall, and unfortunately either wasn't told how to march with these spurs on his boots, or he forgot, but he was near the front as they marched on. But then the spurs locked, and I remember seeing him go straight down onto the stage floor. The other men were following, and the only thing that they could do was just to step over him. The men tried so hard not to completely collapse with laughter. It must have been very amusing to the audience. Maybe some thought it was deliberate if they hadn't seen the opera before. Luckily, the operas are comical. Patrick never did that again and always marched with his feet apart.
And I can vouch for that scene because that was in Brighton, and
was it?
I was in the audience when that happened.
Oh,
so
were you?
I know that is true. And having played Shambalt myself, I can imagine the consternation of the members of the public seeing Shambalt walking around the streets.
Not quite sure he got back in. He might have gone a long way round or something of that. But
back through the auditorium.
Maybe. No, there's lots of funny things that happen, and I'm sure lots of people got their own memories, and luckily we have still got our memories.
Well, yes, and that was absolutely wonderful to hear some of those. So a lot that I hadn't heard before. So thank you very much for sharing those with me. Unfortunately, you never recorded any complete opera for Decca Records. However, recordings do exist of you singing individual songs. So here, from a concert on Radio 2, is Lorraine Daniels with When Maiden Loves, from the Yeoman of the Guard.
When maiden loves, she sits and sighs, she wanders to and fro, unbidden teardrops fill her eyes, and to all questions she replies with a sad hey-ho. 'Tis but a little word, hey-ho, so soft he scarcely heard. Hey-ho, an idle breath, yet life and death may hang upon a maid's hey-ho. An idle breath, yet life and death may hang upon a maid's hey-ho. When maiden loves, she mopes apart as our mops on a tree. Although she keenly feels the smart, she cannot tell what ails the heart with its sad agony. 'Tis but a foolish sigh, ah me, born but to droop and die. Ah me, yet all the sense of eloquence lies hidden in a maid's honey. Yet all the sense of eloquence lies hidden in a maid's army.
The D'Oyly Carte was famous as being a company that was permanently on tour for 48 weeks a year. This must have taken its toll. Do you have any memories of life in digs, or were you one of the individuals that travelled around by caravan?
Well, I certainly didn't do the caravan. That was a little bit before my time. They had like a little caravan club. But certainly did the 48 weeks of the year, which actually I thoroughly enjoyed. I thoroughly enjoyed travelling around and seeing different cities and experiencing new places and meeting new people as well in the digs. Not always, but some were lovely. And but never knowing what the digs were like, we usually had to adapt whatever they may be. What used to happen, the company would advertise for accommodation for the company members. This included everyone, the orchestra, etc. We were warned during a performance that letters were in and available at the interval. It was a bit of a scramble sometimes, taking each letter, reading it, and just hoped you chose the right one. Then the people were contacted by public telephone and the accommodation was booked. We did have mobile phones in those days.
Oh, yeah.
Would they be handy? They would have been really handy, wouldn't they? Sometimes we would join other friends in the company if they could take a few of us at a time. Sometimes we would discover that we had to use electric meters. Sometimes we were forever putting money in the meter. Not easy in the winter. Some digs were lovely and some were unusual. I remember being in Manchester. Sometimes we would be there for a good sort of month. Her name was Mrs. White. She was a disabled lady and she could hardly ever get out. And she always appreciated, there's about 4 of us that she stayed there, and she always appreciated the company, and we would often take her out for a meal at the end of the season that we were there. And so she became quite a lovely sort of friend, really. And so every time we went back to Manchester, we would often go and stay with Mrs. White. In Glasgow, well, varied digs really, but one particular one was the real tall flats that used to be in Glasgow, and we would then, you can imagine, with all your gear, you had to do quite a few journeys going up all these steps up into the flats, and so that some were easy and some weren't, and parking obviously it can be a problem in some of the cities. Can't remember where it was now. But, you go there and you're wondering what sort of digs you're going to have. Well, this particular one it had the toilet, but it had a shower before the toilet. So you had to step into the shower to get to the toilet. And I think that was so bad at one point that quite a few of us had to leave that one. But, that's the joys of touring. But there was one particular time we went down to get the letters, and this particular letter, there was a nice picture at the top of this letter, and I remember saying to one of my colleagues, I said, "This looks really nice digs, really nice digs," and I'm taking it that this picture was part of the home or the digs. And when they looked at this, they all sort of laughed because it was a picture of the Edinburgh Castle. And I think a lot of people do remember that particular moment to this day. Unfortunately, no, we didn't stay at the Edinburgh Castle.
Probably have a number of rooms available anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, when we went to America, Canada, New Zealand and Australia, we stayed in hotels. And so that's majority of those, I would say, were lovely. Some with apartments, so we were able to cook, and some were just pure. We used to go out to restaurants and that. So that was the good part of the 48 weeks of the year. And we toured overseas for quite a time.
Yes. Because you were fortunate enough to be on quite a number of the overseas tours, weren't you?
Yes, I was one of the lucky ones.
All unlucky as some because some
yeah.
people didn't like, I know, the travelling, but
yes,
if it was something that you liked, it was free trip to see somewhere.
I think the problems were if you had. I had mum and dad at home, but if you were married and you had family, it is difficult. It would have been nice to have like the technology today, which you can Zoom and you can have a permanent sort of contact. For me, when I went to Australia and New Zealand, I had lots of family in New Zealand, and I hadn't seen some of my cousins, and so that gave me a great opportunity to see them and where they lived, and they took me out and sightseeing, and that's one of the good things about touring 48 weeks a year, and it does broaden your mind and your knowledge of life, really. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Because of the touring life, you wouldn't have got to see your family often. People say that the D'Oyly Carte was a bit like a family. Did you make any particularly strong friendships, and are you still in touch?
Touring 48 weeks a year, the company members became very close, and special friendships did develop. Yes, we indeed became like a family. We worked and sometimes lived together in digs. We even had the opportunities of having a complete house or a flat to ourselves. Many company members taking turns to cook, wash up, etc. Personally, every city we played, a small group of us tried a new restaurant for a special evening after one of the performances. The same happened with our overseas tours. Always enjoyable. After the company closed, some of the principals decided to perform together. Geoffrey Shovelton, Vivian Tierney, Kenneth Sanford, Alistair Donkin, who understudied the Patter songs, and David Mackey, who was the assistant conductor with the company, was our accompanist. We were engaged by an American agent and performed in many towns and cities around America and Canada. Many flights a day to mainly perform for one night only. Later, we were joined by John Eldon. The friendships continued. Later, Geoffrey Shelton, who was married to Deborah Clegg. Deborah replaced Vivian later on, when Vivian performed elsewhere. Until Geoffrey and Deborah's deaths in 2016, we were constantly in touch most weeks by email and the occasional phone call as they lived in America. Geoffrey was a clear friend and sadly missed both of them very much. Other members would often contact each other and meet up with various performances. Even today in 2024, we contact each other and meet up on a social basis. It's remarkable. Some include David Mackey, Vivian Tierney, Billy Strachan, Pamela Field, David Porter, who's married to Pamela, Bruce Graham, Caroline Hudson, Patricia Ann Bennett, Pam Baxter, Clive Harry, and many more.
The film Chariots of Fire featured the D'Oyly Carte, as one of the characters had a relationship with a member of the company. It's well known that they got a number of the facts, confused, but it was a great opportunity to see the company in action. I spoke a short time ago with Ken Robertson-Scott about his recollections of the film. Are there any lasting memories that you have of that experience?
Well, we were performing in Liverpool, and David Putnam wanted to shoot the Three Little Maids with the chorus at the Empire Theatre. The actress Alice Krieger was to play Yum Yum. I remember teaching her all the moves. In real life, it should have been Pity Sing. So I've heard. But luckily for me, I was able to perform and be part of the film. Everyone had to be up very early. I think I woke up at 5 a.m. We usually do our makeup ourselves, but they wanted to do our makeup and use their wigs. Everything else stayed the same, the costumes and the scenery. It was an experience and quite a tiring day, especially we had our own performances to do. Alice Krieger was grateful for helping her and gave us beautiful bouquets. I took my mother to the premiere at Leicester Square. I remember hearing the music of Vangelis. I remember saying to my mum how great it was, and of course was a wonderful success, just like the film. Later, a few principals were invited to the Dorchester Hotel, I think it was, to perform and have dinner with many of the Chariots of Fire stars, producers and crew members. And we also sang some Gilbert and Sullivan.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I said that you were with the company until it closed. I was in the audience for that last night concert in February 1982 at the Adelphi Theatre in London. It was a very emotional evening. How did you and your colleagues go about preparing for such a difficult performance?
Well, it was certainly a difficult performance, and it was quite a tiring London season, and we had to do extra rehearsals as well. But luckily, I was able to live at my parents' home for the last London season in 1982. We were performing at the Adelphi Theatre, and Mum offered to be a dresser for the ladies' chorus, and we would travel up together, unless I had an extra rehearsal or whatever. So, but mainly we travelled together. I had my own personal dressing room, which I loved. On the last day, there was a final performance of HMS Pinafore, which happened to be a matinee. The performers for the actual last performance had to be fitted with magnificent ball gowns, headdresses and fans. This is all extra time had to be done. The men were in dashing DJs. These costumes were specially hired. During the London season, we were given the songs we were to perform. The last night was recorded and many copies produced. The last performance, never to be forgotten. The road at the stage door was full of fans to say goodbye to us. It's making me all emotional. Many fans followed us around the country and have become friends over the years and still like to follow us wherever we perform. Yes, to be quite honest, I think we kept ourselves going with the performances of the London season, but then it happened. It was the very next day when reality kicked in, and I do remember absolutely cry my eyes out.
Yeah,
you know, and I think it's the whole build-up of the whole thing. So I think on a professional level, we kept ourselves going through it to the final, and then all of a sudden it just hits you, and that's what happened to me anyway.
Yeah, and in the last chorus on the recording of Once More Gondolieri, you can feel the emotion in the voices, and there is actually a slight error in the timing, which John Eldon, who we've been talking about, brought everyone back together again, and can well understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful concert, but so sad. But you went out on a high.
It did. It was difficult to know exactly how to finish it, but we decided that we're saying goodbye to everybody. If you remember, we're just going from one person to another, and then we had all the encores or the clapping and curtain calls, and then the last one was complete.
Wow.
Yeah.
You briefly mentioned the fact that after the company closed, you got involved with a group called The Magic of D'Oyly Carte with some of your former colleagues. What else did you get involved with after you left the company?
Yeah, well, and as mentioned before, 6 principals immediately were asked to perform in America and Canada, who had actually performed with the D'Oyly Carte. We made recordings to sell after each performance. We travelled long distances and many did one-night stands, as opposed to our D'Oyly Carte days, where we would be sort of a month in a city. So we were doing these one-night stands. They were quite exhausting tours, but it was an opportunity to see places and experience new theatres that we didn't perform with the company. We still had great times meeting up with fans in America and Canada. They were very kind, organising dinners and get-togethers. We also formed a group called the Londonairs, and the Londonairs consisted of Vivian Tierney, Geoffrey Shoverton, Clive Harray, David Mackey, and of course myself. And later on, I also worked for Andrew Meadmore.
Right.
With the Meadmores, we did a very long tour of America by coach in 1984. I think that was about a 5-week tour. We were travelling by coach everywhere.
Right.
It was quite arduous. Again, experiencing new places and theatres, and I was engaged as a principal for various Gilbert and Sullivan operas. We also performed at the Barbican and St David's Hall. Also worked with Thomas Round and Donald Adams opera group.
Yep.
And the same happened, and performed as a principal in other venues around the country. They were lovely, friendly people, great to work with. Also with Clive Harray and Fraser Golding, we decided to get together, and we called ourselves Reminiscence. Many songs from the classical musicals and operas that we used to perform. And Clive Harray, Fraser Golding and myself, would get together and rehearse and come up with different programmes after the company going. Another person was Ralph Meanley. Now, Ralph Meanley wasn't with the D'Oyly Carte, but he's married to Pamela Baxter.
Oh.
And decided to do a duo act, which we called Perfect Harmony. David Mackey was our pianist again, a very busy man.
Yes.
We performed a lot together. Again, various programmes were performed. We even went down to Portsmouth to buy authentic naval uniforms. Our memorable moments were performing on the Victory in Portsmouth and SS Great Britain in Bristol. The old D'Oyly Carte Opera Company would regularly meet up and perform for Raymond Gubby at prestigious venues like Barbican, Festival Hall, London, and Bridgewater Hall, Manchester, and Symphony Hall, Birmingham.
And I went to a number of the concerts at Birmingham,
You
because they
did?
were often on New Year's Eve, weren't they?
Yes, they were.
So I would travel off early in the morning, get up for because it was a matinee performance,
Yes.
see the matinee, and then I was at home to spend New Year's Eve with my wife from about 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So, yep.
For that. And we also did the Free Trade Hall at Manchester. Did you ever go
Didn't
there?
go to Manchester, no.
And obviously the Princess Theatre and the Opera House. A special time was performing a Together Again concert. Lots of old artists coming together, but still had their wonderful talents. Thomas Round still dancing the hornpipe, and he was quite oldly then, wasn't he?
Yes.
So that was a special concert, a special memory. I did a lot of different engagements since the closure in 1982. In 1984, I married Brian Patient and had 2 wonderful children, Maria and Stephen. When I was nearly 40, my mum died and decided to change direction and started to teach singing and piano. I was employed by 3 schools. I also started a choir. This fitted in well with my children at school. I still performed, but not long tours. My husband and I even started a business to employ principals to perform with children at various schools around East Anglia. The children would sing the choruses, and they had a great experience with the D'Oyly Carte principals. We even performed at my children's school and raised a lot of money for Radminster School. Also other venues with ex-principals, my husband and I, we actually hired Lincoln Cathedral.
Oh, goodness.
And we were up and down the A1 non-stop trying to put this performance up, but it was a great success. Later still, I had grandchildren, 2 granddaughters who I looked after to help my daughter. I missed my teaching but felt my grandchildren came first. Also, my son needed support. I reached retirement. I had some serious health issues for some time. Only 2 years ago, 2022, someone asked if I would start a singing group. I was at first reluctant due to my health, but thought I could volunteer to help others to sing and perform. From only one person, I now have nearly 50 members. It has gone from strength to strength with support from doctor surgeries and councils. We have performed in care homes and churches to date and still being asked to perform for the future. The Singing for All group literally helps everyone. The members either have health issues themselves, and the people in care homes have the benefit to be uplifted by the singing. We've even sung Gilbert and Sullivan. It actually feels good to help so many people. Both Maria and Stephen were taught piano and singing by me. both joining junior operatic groups. Stephen went on to play other instruments, saxophone and guitar. Maria played the drums and was part of the salsa band at school. Both were heavily involved in music and both sang for local amateur companies. They both increased their knowledge of musicals and Gilbert and Sullivan. Actually, our son Stephen was a member of the South Anglia group. They performed at Buxton Opera House and won prizes at the Gilbert and Sullivan International Festival.
Oh, wow.
It was strange to see my son perform at the theatre. I once performed with the D'Oyly Carte there. Also, it was a very proud moment.
Well, thank you so much, Lorraine, for spending time with me today to talk about your memories of life with the D'Oyly Carte. Lorraine, again, thank you so much.
And thank you, Lawrence. It's been a pleasure.
With bass